CFL 110, your weekly trip around the biggest stories in the Canadian Football League with Jeff Hamilton and Andrew Hustler Paterson.
What's going on, CFL fans? Welcome to another edition of CFL 110 here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk Network, brought to you by our great partners at Coolbet Canada. Head over to coolbet.com, check out this week's lines, and at the top of the page, check out the CFL 110 Boosted Parlay that we'll cook up a little later on after we make our weekly picks. Lots going on in the Canadian Football League on the field, lots going on off the field, social media. But we've got a lot to get to coming out of Week 8, heading into a big Week 9. And to do that, we welcome in the Hammer himself, Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press. What's going on, dude? How are you?
Huss, doing really well. Had a great weekend. I know we're already into the week here, but had a great weekend. I got to check out my first Winnipeg Sea Bears, my first CEBL game live.
First game
live.
Sleeping on it.
Yeah, I know. And it couldn't have ended in more disappointing fashion, to be honest with you. I don't know if you saw what the result was in Edmonton, but they had the tape. What do you call it? They grabbed victory from the jaws of defeat, or whatever it was, or the other way around.
1 point game on either side.
Yeah,
they didn't
bad
come back
situation.
With a win
but also caught a blast from the past over the weekend. Not to get too much into our personal lives here, but I went and saw the reboot of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, a classic dating movie back in 1997 for me. So wraparound weekend, great. Had a birthday party on Sunday, so feeling good, man.
Hammer is always a guy that zigs when everyone zags. Everyone else is watching the reboot of Happy Gilmore. Hammer's got I Know What You Did Last Summer. Let's get to I Know What You Did Last Week. And it starts off with the QB carousel. Right here in Winnipeg, Zach Collaros knocked out of the second consecutive game, did not play the second half against the Toronto Argonauts. And Vernon Adams, who has been one of the great stories early in this season, leading a huge resurgence in Calgary with the Stampeders, knocked out of their game at home, which ended up in a loss to the Montreal Alouettes. Two very significant quarterback injuries, and that has been a common refrain on this program all season long, Jeff.
Yeah, it's really been a reoccurring issue week to week, whether it's starting the year with Chad Kelly on the sideline. He still hasn't returned, right? And that's been a bit of a saga in and of itself. We thought it was going to be week 5, and then head coach Ryan Dinwiddie said by at least week 7, and here we are heading into week 9, Huss, and Chad Kelly's entered the 6-game injured list for the first time this year, right? He'd been on the 1 game throughout this season as we waited for his arrival. Of course, we know that Davis Alexander had an issue early on with his hamstring. He came back too early, re-aggravated it, and looks like he'll be out for the future here, immediate future here at least. And Trevor Harris has missed time. Drew Brown, of course, in Ottawa, he's been in and off the injury list. This feels very reminiscent to 2019, Huss, when speedy Brandon Banks won the MOP race, edging out Cody Fajardo of the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the West. That was a result of all these quality quarterbacks going down during the season. We're seeing, and it's no surprise, really, I guess, outside of maybe Winnipeg here, but even Zach Collaros has dealt with injury issues. At points this season, it's the teams that don't have their starting quarterback that are hurting right now, and even some teams that are doing well or middle of the pack have had to go back and forth with these. So it's been an issue, man. It's been an issue not just for scheming and for coaching staffs, but really for the on-field product. And I think that's the biggest issue here. That's the biggest concern is the on-field product. We've kind of seen the game take a few hits here. As far as excitement levels and whatnot, and I think the biggest concern for me is exposing the depth behind the 9 starters, right? Some of whom are veteran pivots who have kind of are later in their careers and are playing that backup role now, but others are maybe just not as exciting as particularly a PJ Walker, right, in Calgary. I mean, that ultimately, as you alluded to, cost them the game, and they had ample opportunity not just to be in it, but to win that one. So you're already seeing some of the effects of it early on. I just, you're in a situation now, Huss, that if you have a starting quarterback that's healthy, you better be wrapping his body in bubble wrap for fear that he might join the others.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Jeff, and it's a perfect segue into the second segment because the roar has been restored in Steeltown, and the Hamilton Tiger Cats are rolling. They've won 5 games in a row. And listen, with all the talk about, what needs to change in the Canadian Football League and all that, man, I think the league, a lot of the fans needed Sunday night. And it was an absolute classic. A shootout between the Ticats and the BC Lions. You remember we talked about this game, I believe the highest total all year, 56.5, and it didn't stand a chance against Levi Mitchell and Nathan Rourke. And so we'll talk Lions later on and where they sit right now. But the big story has to be the resurgence of the Ticats. Levi Mitchell being essentially born again right now, and him putting together an absolutely vintage CFL comeback in the fourth quarter, capping off a great week of football, but an incredible game. And it is the Ticats right now that are rolling. And you have to consider them as currently constructed as a major, major factor in the East. And we haven't said that for a while, Hammer.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been since the 2021 season, really, that the Hamilton Tiger-Cats have been relevant. And as far as being a team that you were scared of potentially week to week, and that year, of course, being their Grey Cup loss on home soil to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who had beat them, prior to that in Calgary in 2019 to be back-to-back champions. It's good for the league. It's good for that fan base. The Hamilton Tiger-Cats fan base is a passionate one. They're one that show up to games for the most part. I mean, I know they were getting a little bit of issues earlier in the year because they didn't travel to Toronto, but they certainly show up to home games and they get behind their team. They haven't seen a championship since when? 1999, I believe, was their last one.
Yeah, so they're on the clock.
They're in the situation very much like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are. And while there's still plenty of runway in this season, Huss, and we know how quickly this things can change in this season, how fitting would it be for the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, depending on who their opponent would be in the Grey Cup if they get there, but how fitting would it be to win in Winnipeg, given some of their recent history and obviously their long drought that their fan base and their organization, of course, is eager to snap.
Yeah, 5-2 for the Ticats, just quintessential CFL game on Sunday. Hey, just before we move on, I have to mention the interception by Robert Carter Jr. on Levi Mitchell. I got to give Bo credit. He tweeted afterwards, just basically a hat tip of respect for one of the most incredible catches he's ever seen. I thought it was a perfect pass, too. I've never seen a pick like that. And apparently he did it once in college, too. I've now seen the highlight. Absolutely incredible. But we talk a lot about some of the athletes. We focus in on the offense. Dude, that was an all-timer and certainly made every highlight reel this week.
Oh man, and you took the words right out of my mouth. I tweeted after. I got a little bit of flack from some fans or whatever, readers, about it not being necessarily a perfect pass. That to me was a perfect pass. I mean, if he's not there, he's reeling it in. Could it be a little bit deeper to evade some of that perfect opportunity for an interception? Yeah, possibly. But that's exactly what Robert Carter did. He laid out and it took every inch. You hear this game is a game of inches. It took every inch of his leap as he looked like he was floating in the air. And then to bring it down as smoothly as he did, I think that was what makes it so artistic, if you will, why it looked like art to me, Huss, was that it wasn't juggled, it wasn't bobbled, it was just a clean interception. As you mentioned, he did this in college against Utah State. In a very similar, he leaps up in the air, he's already twisting, he catches the ball and then completes essentially the 360 here. And he was asked after the game which one he thought was more impressive. And he actually went with the collegiate pick because he had a broken hand at the time. This guy is a playmaker. He's obviously, is one for the spotlight. And that was an incredible play. I mean, we've already heard it. Others say it. This might be the best play, not just in the CFL, but in history. I was trying to go back and think about a couple different plays. I know there's the S.J. Green touchdown. There's that one. There's the Milt Stiegel, 105-yard or whatever it was. Touchdown against Edmonton in the last play of the game. There's the Gizmo Williams return. There's other plays that happened in the Grey Cup games that are viewed as like the best in the CFL. I guess the only knock against this was it was a Week 8 regular season game and what ultimately turned out to be a losing effort for the Lions. But man, that was highlight reel. And if I'm the CFL marketing team, I am showering that thing all over the place with hopes that it gets picked up, and I'm sure it will.
Yeah, we'll have our historical discussions and can put that up against the best plays we've ever seen at another point. I will say this, though. The clubhouse leader by a significant margin for the CFL play of the year, and maybe the football player of the year, is from that game on Sunday night, and it's by a defensive player, not an offensive player. So the bar's been raised, gentlemen. Let's see if we can beat it. Hammer, moving on. We look at the Western Division. The big winner coming out of Week 8 has to be the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They took care of business while Calgary lost, Winnipeg lost, and BC lost. I think we still feel that Calgary, despite the loss at home to Montreal with Vernon Adams being out, is still in that top tier. But Saskatchewan and Calgary kind of seemingly growing the gap, if you will, between them and everyone else. How do you see the top of the West right now?
Yeah, and to do so, Huss, they just had to eke one out against the Edmonton Elks. Obviously, they had the lead there. It was the Cody Fajardo show late in that game to make it a respectable and almost a comeback, right? That's a 3-point win for the Riders. But it was a cover. And it was a cover. And when you flip over to the other side, and I do think that, there's as we spoke about in the first segment, there is issues in Calgary outside of Vernon Adams as their quarterback. If you were questioning his value, and I'm not sure many were to that team and particularly that offense, you just had to watch the rest of that game as it melted away from the Stamps as PJ Walker came in and just couldn't get anything done. Right? I mean, those were, and it wasn't like Montreal was throwing the lights out. Right? It was Jose Maltos having to hit three field goals in the fourth quarter to come back and win that game. So yeah, certainly, I'm not going to consider the Stamps garbage or even less than I did, than the previous weeks, because their quarterback got injured down the stretch and again melted away that victory. But that to me, I still think if I look in a long term here, which team I could see not just separating themselves but winning this division, it's the Saskatchewan Roughriders. My early pick to win the Grey Cup that I retracted because of the injuries to the O-line, but that doesn't seem to be an issue. The D-line, 8 sacks. Huss, 8 sacks against Edmonton. This is a group that is playing together. They're playing like a team. They have the depth behind quarterback. I'm not saying Jake Mayer is amazing, but I don't think the same thing happens to the Riders that happened to the Stamps if they suffer a late injury to their quarterback. So all of those reasons really have me thinking the long-term sustainability here lies with Saskatchewan. The only thing, Haas, and it's crazy to say, Brett Lowther continues to struggle in the kicking game. His kicking percentage is lower than Trevor Harris's completion percentage. And when that happens, you start hearkening back to 2022 with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Mark Lego, who's kicking ass in Edmonton now. That was the lingering question around that team. They were the team that was going to win. They were the favorites going into the Grey Cup final against Toronto, and ultimately it wasn't the only thing. But one of the big issues, one of the big blemishes for Winnipeg in that game was their kicking game. So I'm very curious how Saskatchewan handles this. Obviously, they're going to get Lowther a longer rope here, but if they don't see something by Labor Day, which is only about a month away, I think they got to start thinking about contingency plans, because I think it's the real deal in Saskatchewan, and you'd hate to see your kicking game cost you the ultimate prize.
No doubt Saskatchewan is in the driver's seat right now. I think Calgary's still in a really good position, assuming they get Vernon Adams back. And the one thing I know we won't see from the Saskatchewan Roughriders is going 2 months without a victory like they did last season. So it's now time for the rest of the West to catch up to the Green Riders. Moving down, and I would suggest quite a significant amount, we get to the mushy middle of that Western Division, and it's 2 teams that both lost on the weekend. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers dropping a 31-17 decision in Toronto, and of course the BC Lions, who lost that heartbreaker at home to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. The Bombers, Hammer, should be sending a thank you note to the Ticats for doing that, because it is a significant gap with BC now having 5 losses on the season, including 2 to Winnipeg. So the Bombers have that season series. But I got to tell you, the Bombers could not be trending more in a bad direction. And to me, BC seems close. They just haven't been able to get it done. I mean, where are you at with the Bombers and Lions coming off disappointing losses in Week 8?
Yeah, well, in Winnipeg, I think you could have looked at the record, and it wasn't great. It wasn't typical at 3-2, but you could say that you lost. And while you did get your asses kicked both occasions, you lost to one team, right? So maybe the issue was the Calgary Stampeders for you. Well, you come out and you lay an egg against Toronto. You have 7 turnovers. We called this, Huss. I mean, at least I called this. Neither of us called it technically, because we both had the Bombers to win this game, to rebound after those tough losses. But we did talk about how difficult it was to play in Toronto, right? So and particularly the protection of the ball. Well, these are just bad signs for Winnipeg right now. They're losing the turnover battle. They're not getting great play from their quarterback. Now, Collaros looks like he might be shelved. His status certainly well up in the air. It hasn't been ruled out for this week. I do think it's not a great sign that he left at halftime, but it didn't come during a play, right? It didn't come during a particularly rough tackle or a sack or whatever, where he was on the ground for a while and then left to the locker room. Clearly something was bothering him. I think it's, probably common sense to speculate it might be the neck injury that made him leave the previous game. So if it's not, it might be something else. But at the same time, I don't think it's, watching Zach on the sideline is a good sign to me. What's not such a great sign is the team does a podcast every Monday, and it's been co-hosted by Zach the last few weeks as what now seems to be a permanent role with the show. That was canceled yesterday. So unlike the previous week where they used it as an opportunity to share that Zach was going to be playing and that it was just a matter of time and whatever, they went black yesterday. So that is a not great sign. So that tells me that while Zach hasn't been ruled in or out, there's still a much of a wait and see approach here. And that's really the issue when you look at the mushy middle. Like, that's why I see the BC Lions, I'm not nearly as panicked. I think this is a team that has a new coaching staff, obviously has a great quarterback in Nathan Rourke and is building that chemistry. This is the time where you want to start, turning that corner if you've been having some growing pains. And I think we saw that with BC despite the loss. Hamilton's a good team. They went toe-to-toe with them. It was an unfortunate situation for them, and I will put this on Buck Pierce a little bit. I thought his play calling was too conservative down the stretch and allowed Hamilton to erase that 10-point lead in the fourth quarter with a pair of touchdowns. So I still think you're seeing the signs. BC's not getting blown out, whereas Winnipeg just can't seem to come close to their opponents. So, as much as that's the mushy middle, there are two teams, even though the results kind of seem the same, and the Lions do have 2 more losses, which is significant in the standings. I don't see Winnipeg's good days improving anytime soon.
Yeah, listen, the Bombers are so far off of their standard that we've become accustomed to over the last 5 years. I mean, offensively, they've struggled. The defense has been absolutely getting torched. I mean, Bridges and Bonds, who had that great start to the season in the first 3 games, have been on the wrong end of all of the highlights. And the team is just getting decimated in the turnover battle. Oh, and by the way, mixing in a whole bunch of undisciplined penalties that are killing them as well, that are totally foreign to the normal game plan of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So, we'll get into this Bomber-Argo rematch in a minute. We talked on Winnipeg Sports Talk yesterday, and I asked listeners, are you more spooked now at 3-3 than you were at 0-4 last year? And obviously 0-4, the record was much worse. Mm-hmm. But if you dive into the last month and the way the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have played and compare that to how close those losses were early last season, there was a justifiable, in 2024, you could say, listen, this team is too good. These games are so close. This is going to turn around. And it did. It is very hard to take anything from these last 3 games from a Winnipeg perspective and say this team is just on the cusp of turning it around. And they're going to have to do that very quickly as they've got the Argos and then Calgary again. And, of course, looking at the Saskatchewan Roughriders and back-to-backs with the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl a little bit later on. As far as the East goes, Start of the year, it sort of seemed like there was Montreal and Toronto, and then there was Ottawa and Hamilton. Well, at this point, we talked about the Ticats, who have really been one of the great stories so far. They're the team that's tied for first with the Montreal Alouettes, who did get a big win on the road against an elite Calgary team without their starting quarterback. And the Argos showed a little bit of life. And listen, I would argue that the Argos were better than a 1-5 team. I mean, they found a couple ways to pull losses out of victory early on. They're still doing it without Chad Kelly, and I thought we saw, in some tough conditions, a pretty solid full team performance by Dinwiddie's group. But I mean, just your thoughts on the hierarchy of the East right now, with Montreal and Hamilton tied at the top, and both Ottawa and Toronto trying to get back into the mix.
Yeah, like the West, there's a lot of comfort at the top there, Huss. And I think that victory by the Alouettes was significant, because I think you could probably look at it, and if we're going to look at 500 as like where you start to wonder about panicking or not panicking or whatever, they could probably, and I don't think they're going to have to, but could probably wait out loss after loss after loss without Davis Alexander and still be in that okay situation. Again, I don't think that's going to happen in Montreal. I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson showed some of the things that the Alouettes thought he would possess when they signed or when they traded for him in the offseason as their backup. So I do think he's trending the right direction after a couple rough starts. But so in that case, Montreal and Hamilton are sitting pretty. Hamilton, they're feeling really good about themselves. When you go down below, Huss, especially we talk about the mushy middle in the West. Both those teams in the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are primed for a crossover playoff spot, right? Because of how tough it's been for the Ottawa Redblacks and the Toronto Argonauts. You look at Toronto, man, that was such a critical victory against Winnipeg. And while, they have history on their side, they've been able to beat Winnipeg. Had they gone to 1-6, you're looking at almost you're really panicking. You're wondering how you're going to go into Winnipeg and win that game to be 1-6, right? Or sorry, 2-6. To be 2-5, well, not great, is better than 1-6, and there just doesn't look like there's any hope in Ottawa, and that's where where they are in desperate need of a victory. I mean, they've had issues, obviously, with Drew Brown's health. He's been in and out of the lineup. He gives them the best chance to win, despite the fact that Dustin Crumb's the only quarterback on that roster who currently has a victory to their name. They need some more consistency in the health department at quarterback, and if Drew Brown can figure things out, I do think they'll be in an okay position. I don't feel great about Ottawa. I think there's been a lot of issues when it comes to penalties. While the defense has played well enough, I think, to win in certain instances, they haven't been picking up the added slack that's been left over from their offense. And it's put a situation, Huss, and I think a lot of people, we talked about this on whether or not Bobby Dice's future in Ottawa would remain. We talked about his losing, his win-loss record being, tilting heavily in favor of the losses, almost to a 2-1 margin with his victories, but just not being able, or just coming into this season with such high expectations and falling so short of them. Ottawa doesn't have a really, awesome schedule here ahead of them. They got to play Calgary off the bat. Hopefully their bye week worked well. They got a pretty much a must win against Toronto the following week, and then it's Winnipeg after that. And you look at that stretch here, and it's not like it's more daunting than anybody else's per se. And you when you're the Ottawa Redblacks, everybody's ahead of you, so every team you're chasing, it's just a lot of pressure there. And I'd be curious to know what the vibe is around the facilities and what the energy is like, because by week 9, Huss, you want to be kind of coming into your own and playing the kind of football you want to be playing as you move into the season. The last thing you want to be doing is searching for answers. And that's really where the Red Blacks feel right now. And I don't see anything from really any of their games that suggest that they'll catch up to anyone in the East or even comparable to the Bombers or Lions. Where do you stand?
Yeah, listen, I'll get to where I stand in just a minute, because we're going to get into this Calgary-Ottawa pick to start off our picks for CoolBet for week 9 in the league. I mean, listen, I am so impressed with Hamilton, and they seem to be trending in an upward direction. The offense is absolutely elite, and it seems like their defense is able to mix in a stop here and there. I mean, certainly the offense is going to be what carries them. I still think Montreal, with that defense and the way they look when Davis Alexander is sort of the team to beat. But to me, Hamilton is absolutely a contender in the East and a Grey Cup contender, and we haven't said that for a while. Listen, I think the Argos are going to be in the mix by the time we're all said and done here. I thought they were impressive in that game against Winnipeg, although Winnipeg was on the other side of that ledger to a negative standpoint. And with Ottawa, this is a time for desperation, urgency, focus, commitment, because I do feel like they're going to be playing for their head coach on Thursday against the Calgary Stampeders, who ironically, despite their great record, is the team that Ottawa has beaten this year. This series, this game is in the nation's capital. As you mentioned, Ottawa is coming off the bye, and they are a 5-point home underdog to the Calgary Stampeders, who hope to have Vernon Adams back, but that won't be clear until later on this week, closer to game time. Calgary versus Ottawa. Ottawa +5, Calgary laying 5 on the road. Where are you at on this one, Hammer?
I keep what you just said sticks in the top of my mind, that this team will be playing for Bobby Dice. If we're, the win-loss record, as I mentioned, isn't there. But what's the one thing we've heard about, Dice and his coaching and essentially his tenure with the Red Blacks is just how much the players like him, love him. And so you're staring at 1-6. I mean, if you can't do it for yourselves, you might as well do it for your coach, whose job could ultimately be decided. I don't know about this week, because if you're expecting them to beat the high-flying Stampeders, why wouldn't you just, kind of do the job a week before? But my point is that they'll be playing for him. Calgary, I don't think Vernon Adams is going to be an issue. That being said, I could be completely wrong on that. I think signs are indicating he will play this week. When you looked at the game, it was clearly concussion protocol. He was emotional on the sidelines. He wanted to be with his teammates. So assuming that he isn't dealing with any significant symptoms here this week, I imagine Vernon Adams will be playing. You mentioned that Ottawa was the team that, their one victory so far this year has come against Calgary in Calgary. I will remind viewers that was the insane weather game that felt like it was fall. It was like -2 or something in Calgary at the time.
They had a wind chill.
So that we often hear weather's the great equalizer. I don't think there is any better example than that one. So I don't know how much stock I put into that. In fact, Huss, it was after that game that I was torching the Stamps, believing that everything that we had seen through the first 2 games was a mirage, and then they rip off 3 of their most impressive victories that I've seen in a long time. So I don't, that 5 points is rough for me. I think I'm going to take Ottawa. I think I'm going to take Ottawa. It heavily depends on Drew Brown playing, and the signs so far with him working with the first team offense suggests he will be out there. I think that's super important. I think Ottawa is just so desperate. Maybe there was some cracks in the armor that were exposed against Montreal last week that Ottawa can pick up on. Again, Ottawa is coming off the bye week. So all those things combined, I'm going to put some trust in Bobby Dice and the Ottawa Red Blacks, and I'm going to take the points at home for Ottawa.
You will put the trust in the Ottawa Red Blacks, and I too will put some hard-earned Canadian currency on the 1-6 Red Blacks. They're actually staring 1-7 in the face because they haven't had the benefit of 2 byes so far, Jeff. To me, this is a put up or shut up time for the Ottawa Red Blacks, and I think that they're better than they have showed so far this year. You have to consider what has happened at the quarterback position with them starting 3 different players. And listen, this team is going to go and have a chance to win if Drew Brown is in. He hasn't been in enough. They've had a couple tough losses. To me, the bye week, the full week of practice, knowing exactly what their situation is, I think Ottawa is in this game. I think this is a close game in the 4th quarter. And to me, taking the +5 with the home dog. Ottawa, for the record, is +182 to win this game. I do not rule out the possibility of them actually winning outright. But for the purposes of our against the spread picks, I'm actually feeling pretty good about Ottawa +5 in this one.
I'm feeling good about it too, as you say. Like I like, and when you look at these the style in which CFL games are. Like you mentioned, Huss, even if they're getting their asses kicked, they can't drop to 1-7. So like, they're going to be in desperation mode, running hurry up offenses in the event that they're down, right? Whether it's a couple touchdowns or 18 points or whatever, 10 points, like they're going to be in desperation mode right to the wire, particularly because they're at home too, where they just haven't been very good. So I do think that this is a real opportunity for the Red Blacks, and I'm with you. I like those points. I think those points have the potential to shift by the end of the week, but we'll see. I do, while they're 1-6, and that's certainly not something to be proud of, I do think this is, to your words, desperation time for Ottawa, and that's why I'm going with them as well.
Yeah, listen, I expect Ottawa to show up and play Calgary hard and, see if they can pull a win out. But I do think it'll be a close game. Give me the Ottawa Red Blacks +5 in the opener, which brings us to the rematch between the Argos and the Bombers, Princess Auto Stadium, Friday Night Football, right here in Winnipeg. The line for this game is Bombers -6.5. It is the largest line of the week in the Canadian Football League, which to me is one of the more preposterous lines I can remember seeing in recent CFL history. Now listen, I had the Argos +3 last week. We saw it go to +5. And I always said, listen, I could see the Bombers win, but if they were winning, it was going to be a tight game. It was going to be very close. Unfortunately, the Bombers didn't play well enough to keep that game close at all. Toronto, even with Nick Arbuckle, has a lot of playmakers. Their defense has famously given Zach Collaros and the Bombers offense fits. And then when you combine what is happening on the Winnipeg side of the football, regardless of who they're playing, with the turnovers, the defense just melting away after a nice start to the season, legitimately, I thought that this line would maybe be 3 for Winnipeg. Essentially, we'll give the Bombers 3 points, the full 3 for home field advantage for that sold-out crowd at Princess Auto Stadium. They can always be impactful. But other than that, if you were putting Toronto and Winnipeg on a neutral field right now, would the Bombers even be a pick'em? I don't think so. So, to me, when I saw this at 6.5, all I can think is that both people and odds makers, and listen, the Bombers have earned this. They've been the best team in the West. They've found ways to win. They've been to the Grey Cup 5 straight years. So I get that people are expecting this team just to turn it on or flip the switch or show up and be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Fortunately, I've watched every single play of this season, and especially this last month. And they are so far from the standard right now, Jeff, of what we've been accustomed to here in Winnipeg, that it really is concerning. And I mean, it's not like last year's 0-4 start where they lost a couple 2-point games in an overtime game. They've been getting steamrolled. And to be honest, the final score in these last couple of games, to be honest, sort of flattered the Bombers. So the thought of laying 6.5 points for the Bombers, frankly, against anybody, but especially a team like Toronto that continues to give them fits, to me, this is a no-brainer. Toronto +6.5. And I, as a Bomber guy, I'm just hoping that the team can find a way to win a close one, because I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see them blowing anybody out by a touchdown or more, especially an Argos team that I think found a little something last night and is coming around the corner knowing that Chad Kelly's probably not coming back imminently.
Yeah, a few things here, Huss. One being, to your point, it's not like the Bombers have been beating anybody. They've been losing, but they've been getting their asses kicked. So it's not like this has been close games and whatever. So to suggest that the Bombers are going to go out and beat, the Toronto Argonauts, who just a week prior fed them their lunch by a touchdown, yeah, it seems hard to believe. Now, is it impossible? Absolutely not. I mean, the Bombers could have one of their vintage home games. They could, maybe they are done taking their licks and are feeling like they're in desperation mode, right? And you see that attack. But when you consider Zach Collaros coming off injury here, not really knowing if he's going to play, what we've seen from Chris Streveler in the offense in relief of Zach, I don't know how you think they're going to win by that margin. And the other part, just like I mentioned about the Ottawa game, Toronto's desperate too, right? Toronto isn't going to just pack it up and if they're losing in the game. So I like the backdoor cover for this, right? It's again one of those games where it's a 10-point game, right? And they score a touchdown, or it's a 12-point game and they score a touchdown on prevent defense, and it's still, they still need another touchdown. There's lots of things that play out at the end of games when you look at points in your favor. And so in this situation, to your point, I think, this is obviously of the odds makers having a ton of respect for Winnipeg and what they've done in previous seasons. But I look at that and I go, okay, this game's going to be a close one. It feels like a close one. And I don't think if the Bombers do win this one, right, because it's very possible that Toronto could sweep this series. If Winnipeg does win this one, I don't think they're going off. We've seen Toronto have this team's number. In the past, we've seen Arbuckle torch them in their last 2 games against this team. So to get that kind of respect in points, I'm probably going. Well, I am going with Toronto in this one for sure.
The defense has been getting absolutely shredded, and not just by Vernon Adams. They got torn up last week. I mean, the second and longs are just seemingly better than 50-50 chances right now. I think they're giving up 2nd and 7 or more at 61% over the last 3 games. I mean, it's
Stanley Bryant too, right? Like he's missed the last 2 games, and I think that's been a little bit overshadowed, right? And even if he does return, right, we're talking about a 9-year-old now, like 30. He's definitely my age, so it's that he's up there. Coming back from 2 weeks off might be a bit rusty, but man, do they need him, right? We hear a lot about O-line. How important the O-line is and chemistry and whatnot. I mean, certainly covering Zach's blind side, that's a guy that you want to have in there. And because when he's out, it just shifts everything. Someone moves over to that position. Someone comes in. It's just, it's too many moving parts for a unit that likes to be in lockstep with one another.
Listen, the defense is really concerning right now. The offense with Zach Collaros put up 3 points in the first half. And then they got a garbage time touchdown with Chris Streveler. I mean, they just simply have not been close to the level you need to win football games right now. And, with, the guys that are out, including Dalton Schoen and Bryant, and we'll see what happens with Zach Collaros. I mean, it's very tough. This is the most shocking line I've seen in a long time in the Canadian Football League. And I will be very interested to see whether many people feel the same way we do, and this comes closer to 4 or 3.5 or 3, where I sort of thought it would be, or whether it stays that way because of the reputation that the Bombers have earned over the course of the last 5 seasons.
I want to say one thing about this, and it's not the bet for this, it's prop. Keep an eye on Zach Collaros' passing yards. And I say this because now he's had a couple games earlier this year where Winnipeg has been uncharacteristically desperate, right? So they toss up these balls and it adds up. But when Winnipeg is playing Blue Bomber football, Zach's getting about 260 max 270 passing yards. It's a complementary game with the running game. And so that's all I'd say is look at it. I mean, obviously he's dealing with injury right now, but when they have too high of passing yards for Zach, especially after injury, it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it usually means they're down by a couple touchdowns in the second half and they're throwing it all over the place. Brady Oliveira, for that point, while we're mentioning it, 81 yards on 13 carries. They got to find a way to get him the ball more. And I realize that you can't just do it on every single play. Part of that gets back to the quarterback. Listen, Brady's getting you 6 yards on first down. Figure out a way to get the 4 and keep the offense on the field and not throw the defense back out there, which has been very problematic for this team. Got absolutely destroyed in the time of possession in the game in the first end of this home and home, heading into Friday night's game with the Bombers. So we're both on Argos plus 6.5. Saturday, we have a doubleheader beginning in the afternoon. The Edmonton Elks, speaking of desperate teams, trying to find some positives. I would say that they actually did take a step forward with Cody Fajardo at quarterback last week. They were certainly more competitive. They are at home. They're taking on the hottest team in the Canadian Football League, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are just coming off that amazing comeback win against the BC Lions. Hamilton is a 4.5-point favorite, playing on a relatively short week. Interesting to note the travel as well for the Ticats, traveling to BC, back to the Hammer, practice for a couple days, and then back to the West to Edmonton to play this game on Saturday afternoon. What do you make of the Ticats on the road? 5-game winning streak is a 4.5-point favorite.
It's an interesting spread, no? You like what do you think's being factored into this spread? To your point, the fact that they've had to travel to BC this past week and then have to travel to Edmonton again on what you said, as you mentioned, was a relatively short week, not a super short week, but a short week nonetheless. It's an odd number to me because I really like what Hamilton's been doing. I think you also need to remember that while Hamilton continued the good times rolling, they did have to erase a 10-point lead against the BC Lions in the fourth quarter, right? They were able to do that in dramatic fashion, but it wasn't like they were burning the lights off BC before they earned those 2 points. That being said, I'm with you. I think Edmonton took a step forward with Cody Fajardo. Obviously, a lot of that damage as far as points went happened later in the game, and what's been has been characteristic of the Saskatchewan Roughriders this year, letting teams back into games that they've been having a healthy lead in the fourth quarter. So again, that wasn't necessarily toe to toe. So I still think there's issues with the Elks, and I like Hamilton's defense. So, the 8 sacks, I doubt Edmonton's going to give up 8 sacks again this week, but they are going with Cody Fajardo, which I think is the right decision. They're still susceptible to pressure. And so I think Hamilton's improved defense, the ball hawks they have in the secondary, that's going to prove an issue for a guy like Cody Fajardo, who, despite being, up there in age and later in his career, still likes to chuck the ball. So in that respect, I think that I'm going to go with Hamilton. I'm going to go with Hamilton on the road, to cover that 4.5-point spread. And I think you see another complete game from Hamilton with their defense and their offense both contributing to points on the board.
This is a really tough pick because I do think the Elks are a far more live dog with Cody Fajardo there. And I think that, having a game behind him and another week of practice, getting ready for Hamilton is going to bode well for that Edmonton offense. I have real concerns about the Edmonton defense. The way Bo is torching everybody right now, I think to win this game, the Elks are going to need to probably put up in the neighborhood of high 20s or 30 points, and that's if things go well against the Hamilton defense, which does make me pretty nervous. We went into last week with about a 10-point spread. I think it closed at 9.5 for Edmonton. I did take Edmonton, with the points, and, it did end up being a bit of a backdoor cover there at the end. But I think there were some signs that, okay, Edmonton's getting a little bit closer to being able to compete with better teams in the league. I'm going to take Edmonton in this game. I'm going to take the 4.5 points as the home dog. And part of it is a bet on Cody Fajardo. Part of it is expected better results with the new coaching staff that's now about midway through the season is looking on it. The other thing that I will mention is that I do think there's the potential for maybe a little bit of a letdown for the Hamilton Tiger Cats on this run that they've been on. It's tough travel right now. I think they go into a game seeing this team that has been struggling and only has one win in the season and think, okay, this game is ours. And it probably is. But I have a feeling this one game might be a little closer than a lot of people think. This is not a strong play, but I will, having to make a pick one way or the other, I'll go with the home dog. I'll take the points, 4.5 for Edmonton.
If the Elks are going to win, and you're going to be right, Huss, they got to establish the run game, man. They've ran 5 times in each of the last 2 games and have Javon Leake and Justin Rankin on their team. Those are 2 number 1 playmakers. And you got it, while they've been involved in the pass game, you need to establish the run game. And this is where it drives me bananas, and I think you are onto something. This does feel like a trap game for Hamilton. It does feel like a desperate game for the Elks. But Jordan Maksimic needs to figure things out, man. Everyone's talked about him as being some kind of offensive guru. He's pretty much taken the 2022 season in BC with superhuman Nathan Rourke, who still hasn't gotten back to that caliber and ridden that as being some kind of genius. Well, here, you got your pocket passer you like. Establish the run in this game, man. You got two guys that you want to open up the deep pass, establish that. If they can establish the run in this game, I agree with you. I think they can control the clock. They can limit Levi Mitchell's opportunities, and that's going to be their key to success, because unless they put up high 20s, they're going to be in trouble. And if you keep giving Levi Mitchell the ball, he's going to torch you. So if you don't establish that run game and you rely on Cody Fajardo throughout that game, you are going to be in trouble. But if they can do that, I'm with you. I think that could actually be a pretty savvy bet by the end of the weekend.
The finale of Week 9 is Saturday night, and it is a beauty. The 6-1 Saskatchewan Roughriders taking on the first place 5-2 Montreal Alouettes. This game is in Montreal. We don't expect Davis Alexander in for the Alouettes, which means MBT plays once again. And the Owls are a 3-point home dog to the first place Saskatchewan Roughriders. Come in playing some very, very good football. But, road game, tough place to win. Long travel. Montreal coming off a pretty impressive win considering their circumstances. Where are you at on this one, Hammer?
Yeah, I'm going straight to the Riders. I know it's a road game. Montreal has a solid defense. I'm not buying into McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I think he took a step in the right direction, absolutely, compared to his first couple starts this year. I mean, he took that shot at the CFL and TSN panel about, don't say good things about him or whatever. Don't worry. I don't think that narrative is starting anytime soon. And for that reason, I think Saskatchewan, to my points earlier, have been rolling, right? Their one weakness seems to be their kick game. And so long as Brett Lothar doesn't have another meltdown, I don't see why Saskatchewan shouldn't keep moving the ball here. I like all three phases they have. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, to be sure. I do think it's going to be closer, but I do think that Saskatchewan gets the job done on the road. And because I look at Montreal's victory, right? And while it was, while it was important for their team in the standings, I don't know how convincing it was when you factor in that VA was hurt when he was hurt, that they never actually got a touchdown in that comeback. It all came in, and they had to squeeze one out with a 58-yarder from Jose Maltas, who I have, by the way, have to give a little bit of credit to here. I've been rough. Not rough, like, because I'm not suggesting I've wasted a ton of ink on him, but I've talked about how they've sheltered this guy, right? How they don't really put him out there for big boots, much like we see in Winnipeg with Sergio Castillo and a few other markets, right? So every time he did like the flexing bicep pose after he hit field goals, I guess kept thinking like, this guy he's sheltered. He only had to that point 3 attempts in 2.5 years. Beyond 50, right? This was his 4th attempt, so he nailed that one. But my whole point in this whole thing was saying that it wasn't an impressive comeback. It was a good comeback, but it was the benefit of CFL time, 20-second clock. The fact that the clock goes at a snail's pace in the final 3 minutes, that's why they got the victory. If VA was in that game, we wouldn't even be talking about the Alouettes, and I think that spread would be even more in Saskatchewan's favor. So I'm taking advantage of the lucky comeback from Montreal, and I'm going with Saskatchewan Roughriders to cover that spread.
The Argos season has been so interesting, especially when you think about Alexander being in, Alexander being out, coming back in, being out again. The last 3 games the Alouettes have played have all been decided on a razor's margin. They lost that ridiculous game at home to the Lions by 1 point, 21-20.
Returned the favor last week.
They beat Toronto by 1 point the following week in that crazy comeback fourth quarter where Alexander was in and then got hurt again. And then they find a way to win by 2 against the Calgary Stampeders. I do think their defense is good enough to keep this game close. And funny thing is, when you break it down and talk about what could be the difference in this football game, I bring you the kicking game. Malto was coming off a huge performance, doing what his team needed to do, a Castillo-esque 58-yard bomb to win the game, while Brett Lally, I still can't believe that stat you dropped about his kicking percentage compared to Trevor Harris's completion percentage. But he has been struggling. Bottom line is, I don't think this is going to be an easy night at the office for the Riders, even though I do think they are the better team. And I think, gun to my head, I think I'm on every underdog this week. I think I'm going to take the 3 points for Montreal and think that this is going to be a very, very close game. So we're going to have a little work to do putting together our parlay here. But
are you and I on completely different pages? Do we have any?
We're both on Ottawa and we're both on Toronto.
Okay, right, yeah.
And then we're on other sides of this Hamilton-Edmonton game. And we're on opposite sides of the Saskatchewan-Montreal game.
So you said you had Edmonton last week. You didn't have Edmonton last week. Maybe you had it in your own personal, not in the show, I don't think. Did you? You saw those.
Yeah.
Did you take them? Did we take them? Okay,
yeah,
cool. Sorry about that.
I took Edmonton because when we were doing it, it was 10.5. It
was 10.5, right? Yeah,
and then it went down to 8.5, and then it had to finished up at 9.
For sure.
So listen, we're obviously going to take Ottawa. We're obviously going to take Toronto. I guess I could be convinced to maybe put the Riders on. We'll take that to 2.5, and a 3-point win would be a win as opposed to a push. We're going to have to get it on a 0.5 one way or the other for the combo card. I mean, listen, I guess I could probably be convinced. Do you have a feeling on the total on either of those Hamilton-Edmonton games or Saskatchewan-Montreal?
I think the potential for Hamilton-Edmonton could be off the charts. But I feel like, and maybe I'm putting my credibility or whatever, my choosing power at stake here. But don't you think the luck's run out in Montreal? Like, don't you think, like, if you look at those victories, yeah, they're all razor sharp, but it took a bad penalty against BC to get into that range. It took 3 field goals last week and an injury to Vernon Adams Jr. And here's the thing, I'm actually convincing myself the other way, because if there's one characteristic of Saskatchewan this year, it's they let teams come back, right? They let teams come back. So I'm off that. Sorry, I apologize for wasting everybody's 45 seconds here in my suggestion. But what's the over on Hamilton? What about the over?
Like the Hamilton Edmonton game is 54.
Okay.
What if we do over 53.5 in that game? Because as I said, I absolutely think that Bo Levi is going to get his.
And Cody loves to chuck it. Absolutely. 53.5.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll take Ottawa to 5.5. We will take Toronto at plus 6.5, 2 dogs, and we'll take the over 53.5. And we'll have that up with a nice boost for you in the Cool Bet combos. And don't forget, folks, if you're betting CFL every week at Cool Bet, whatever your favorite play is, it can be a money line, it can be a point spread bet, it can be a total, it can be a parlay, but whatever your favorite one is, click that green box. You've got it once a week, the 30% win boost to add to whatever your favorite wager is. The lines are all up. I suggest you look at them now. One thing to note, based on the lines that we have, again, right now, early Tuesday, it's Ottawa plus 5, it's Toronto plus 6.5, Edmonton plus 4.5, Montreal plus 3.5. Watch the line movement because the one trend that has been pretty strong all year long is fading the line movement. If you see a line move 2 or 3 points one way, if you go the other way, so far this season, you would have been very well taken care of. And listen, we saw it last week with the Winnipeg-Toronto game, which was 3, then it was 5, 6 in some places. And of course, that is what we happened. Going to be a really interesting week, Jeff. Only one team on the bye week. It starts off with Calgary and Ottawa on Thursday. And then, of course, Friday Night Football here in the Peg, Argos Bombers rematch. And then a doubleheader on Saturday. Ticats Elks in the afternoon. The evening game, Riders Montreal from La Belle Provence. Quick update on the CFL futures and how much has this changed over. I believe the Ticats last week were plus 1050 or 11-1, and the Bombers were plus 400. Complete reversal. As of right now, Alouettes plus 275, Saskatchewan right there at plus 285. Disappointing that Davis Alexander isn't playing this week, because I think you could make the argument that that is the marquee matchup right now in the CFL, although Calgary and Hamilton will have something to say about that. Stamps at plus 360. Hamilton now all the way down to 4-1, while the Bombers have ballooned to plus 950. BC is plus 1250. Argos 13-1. And just about ready to cross off the Elks and the Red Blacks on the list. Ottawa 40-1. Edmonton 55-1, but they're still alive, and that's why they play the games. Hammer, great stuff as always. Fun show today. Enjoy the games this weekend, and I'll look forward to chopping it up with you a week from today as we head into week 10 here on CFL 110.
Always a pleasure, man. Looking forward to these games. They're always exciting, whether it's top of the standings or bottom of the standings. When it's a 9-team league, significance week to week changes so dramatically. So can't wait to chop it up. Hopefully our picks serve you well, and either way, the games are exciting.
Enjoy the football, everybody. We'll see you next week on CFL 110 right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Thanks to Michael Remus for making it all happen. Of course, our partners at coolbet.com. If you haven't played a coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. We'll see you next Tuesday right here on CFL 110.
You've been listening to CFL 110. Tune in next week for more great Canadian football discussion.